Now, as promised, this week's Let's Talk Some Star Wars video is going to be a follow-up to last week's, where I of course mainly read comments from women who had a lot to say about the character of Rey. And if you didn't see it, I'll include a link to it in the description below, though it's not exactly required viewing to understand this video. Nevertheless, there are some fantastic comments read in that video that hopefully begin to show that it isn't just male Star Wars fans who have issues with Rey. And before I get to a few of the comments left on that video, and to a recording my fiance made about Rey and the other women of Star Wars, which I'll put at the end of this video, let me again quickly give you my take on this whole situation. And I say quickly because I know I've gone over this many times, in many different ways in many other videos. Okay then, the first thing that needs to be covered in regards to Rey and the controversy around her, I guess you could call it, is that it needs to be made clear that a vast majority of Star Wars fans who have an issue with her character do not have an issue with her because she's a female character. Instead, they mainly dislike her because they feel she is a poorly crafted or written character, and they find it difficult to relate to her struggles, or what they may think of as a lack of struggles. And though you can certainly disagree with that assessment, and you're free to argue against it if you desire, what you cannot, or perhaps I should say what you should not do, is jump to the conclusion that mainly male fans' dislike for the character of Rey is mostly or entirely motivated by a dislike for the character's entire gender, especially when plenty of women share the same issues and concerns as men do, and when there's also a track record for these same male fans who dislike Rey to consider other female characters in the same franchise to be great and beloved characters. Now, that being said, are there some people out there that dislike Rey primarily or entirely because she is a female character? Yes, of course there are some. Of course there is a very small group of fans that don't like her simply based on her gender. There's always a bad apple or two in every bunch. Welcome to the world. It's always been this way, and sadly, it probably always will. But the thing is, those few bad apples don't get to speak for the rest of the bunch. A so-called fan who takes to Twitter and says some horrible things about Kelly Marie Tran, for example, because they seemingly lack the ability to separate the actress from the character she plays, does not get to speak for me or any other fan. And quite honestly, I'm not even sure how they became fans of Star Wars in the first place if strong female characters or women in roles of prominence bother them so much. Because one could easily get the impression, after the first two Star Wars movies, that Leia was the leader of the rebellion. But it turns out she wasn't, because there was actually someone else above her, and that was another woman by the name of Mon Mothma. And guess what? In my entire life, all 40 years of loving Star Wars, and talking about it with anyone and everyone else I've come across who also loves it, never once have I heard or read someone say that they don't like that essentially two women were in charge of the Rebel Alliance. Which then begs the question, how the hell have we now gotten to a point where levying any criticism against a female character in Star Wars means male fans have been sexist all along? How did we make that illogical leap? How do we ignore numerous well thought out arguments against Rey, some done by women, and focus instead on the minuscule fraction of a percent of men who hate Rey just because she's a woman? Why do we shine a spotlight on the one or the few who have hateful things to say, and ignore the voices of the many who lay out rational arguments against Rey's character? And look, I'm a pretty chill and relaxed guy for the most part. I can take most anything in stride, which is probably a good trait to have for someone putting themselves out there on YouTube and opening themselves up to criticism from anyone and everyone. And I really don't let the negative comments I get sometimes bother me, and I have received my fair share of rather nasty and hateful comments. Believe it or not, I've literally had people tell me I should go kill myself because they disagree with me on something Star Wars related, which is equal parts sad, hilarious, and disturbing. But it has happened, and I just delete the comment and move on to the next one. Because more often than not, those who do comment are civil and respectful, and have something truly interesting to say, even when you're disagreeing with me. In my time doing this on YouTube, I've learned a lot about Star Wars, and about my fellow fans. And I truly want to say thank you to everyone who does take the time to leave a comment. Anyway, the only time I really get bothered is when people leave comments where it's quite clear they either didn't watch the video at all and just assumed what it was going to be about based on the title, or they maybe watched it but somehow only heard exactly what they wanted to hear and just ignored any real argument I tried to present. And I'm certainly not saying that you have to agree with me. That's not the point of my channel, and that's not the point of making videos called Let's Talk Some Star Wars. In fact, I tend to engage more with the people who disagree with me because I enjoy a good friendly debate. But it's actually a little frustrating when I put out perhaps a 15-minute video where I try to calmly and rationally lay out some reasons why I didn't like Rey or The Last Jedi in general, only to then have someone tell me that I'm lying or making everything up, and that I need to come clean and admit the reason I don't like it is because I'm threatened by a female Jedi character or something along those lines. And the real head-scratching part for me is, why is someone else telling me why I didn't like a movie or a character in that movie? Why do they automatically jump to this extreme conclusion about someone else, especially when that someone else just spent 15 minutes laying out other reasons why, the real reasons why they didn't like a character or the movie in general? Because never in any other circumstance have I told someone that, hey, I didn't like that movie, and then given them the reasons why, only to be told I'm lying or wrong about why I didn't like the movie. So why is it different here with this movie and this character? Why is the character of Rey above reproach? Why can't I just not like the character or think she's poorly crafted without it being about her gender? And look, if you think The Last Jedi is a fantastic masterpiece of a movie and you absolutely love the character of Rey, she's your favorite of all time, that's completely cool with me. I disagree with you, but it's still cool with me. I respect your opinion and only ask that you respect mine. And don't jump to some crazy conclusions about why I don't like the character. And the thing is, I fully believe that most people who love The Last Jedi and the character of Rey don't think that the reason why others dislike her or the movie is because they're just all sexist. I think this is yet another example of a minority misrepresenting the majority. I fully believe that most people who enjoy The Last Jedi can understand that people can and will have different opinions, and that's okay. The same way that I, as someone who is a fan of the prequels, can and do understand and accept that not everyone enjoys them, and that actually a lot of people despise them. And guess what? When the shoe's on the other foot for me, and I'm the one who likes something others dislike, I don't change my tune. You have every right not to like the prequels, and I can see and acknowledge the flaws in them, but they don't hinder my ability to enjoy them. Neither does someone else's disliking them hinder my ability to enjoy them or make me want to irrationally defend them with absurd claims. And that's why I'm not going to try and come up with ridiculous reasons as to why people didn't like the prequels. I think it'd be much easier to instead just listen to the reasons why they don't like them and leave it at that. The same way it'd be much easier for those handful of people out there who want to perpetuate this unfounded belief that most men who didn't like Rey are sexist. I mean, wouldn't it just be easier to finally listen to what men are actually saying about her and to believe them? Or to listen to what women, who I guess are being sexist against other women, have to say about Rey and that these issues are pretty much the same? Isn't it time to lay this silliness to rest already? Okay, now let's move on to some comments, starting as always with the top-rated comment, which came to us from Winston, who had this to say. The people who like to defend Mary Sue's by saying those characters are underrepresented should know that defending Mary Sue's is like defending one-dimensional male protagonists, like Justice League movies, Superman, who has no personality and easily defeats Steppenwolf while the rest of his team almost gets overwhelmed. The problem is not the gender of the characters, but their personality and development. Our next comment then comes to us from Daniel Bandy, and though it's short, I think it sums up this whole debate best. Why does gender even matter? Just make a good character and I'll like them. Moving on now to a comment from Daniel Wright, who said, "It's not hard for me to see myself in a female character or identify with one, but Rey's character is too thin, too perfect. My reaction to her is identical to that of a poorly written male hero. I had high hopes for her after The Force Awakens, but none of the anticipated evolution occurred. Once upon a time, the late Carrie Fisher and I chatted over Messenger about her character's potential growth and the possibility of her wielding a lightsaber prior to 2013. I was very excited about potential growth and her training. Carrie was so polite and kind." And in response to Daniel's comment, we got one from Benjamin Johnson, who had this to say. "I have heard Daisy is a relatively fun person, what we kind of saw from Rey in The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi made her dull, bland, and overpowered. She didn't have any obstacles that she failed to overcome. She even beat up Luke Skywalker. I was in the same boat. High hopes for Rey. I don't give a crap that she's a chick. Ahsoka is my favorite Star Wars character right now. Why? Because she's not a superhero. She's a warrior who has seen many battles and failed. A lot. And has even seen her own master, who she looked up to and admired, fall to the dark side. Rey has already beaten the main villain twice. Oh, and she used to mind connection to steal his knowledge of the Force, according to the novel." Okay, and the last comment I'm going to get to comes to us from The New Flutist, who had this to say. Yo, you didn't read my comment last video, that's okay, I'll just say it here again, more condensed. I didn't think about Rey being overpowered at all until I read other people's opinions on the internet. My impressions before internet influence was she was odd. The way she was odd was she should have logically fallen to the dark side by now because of how emotional she gets and how it drives her, but the storytelling doesn't let her, nor does it point this out as a character flaw. Isn't this a double standard that Kylo Ren's rage is looked upon as wrong, but when Rey screams, it's okay? I want her to fall, unconsciously and consciously. Why? Maybe because that will give her a more interesting character arc, a true blunder to learn from. I'm hoping for episode 9 to show this twist, because as of now, the jury is still out. She could get a lot more interesting. Only after episode 9 will I have a more certain opinion of her. Heroes and heroines spring forth from realistic, tangible storytelling. The characters I enjoy the most act the most sincere, like Finn for example. Realness and sincerity leads to relatability and ultimately, likability. And this is once again where I say thank you to everyone who left a comment and apologize that I couldn't get to all of them, because as usual, a lot of you had a ton of great things to say, and since I kind of rambled on a bit at the start, I don't have much time to get to as many of them as I'd like. And if you're wondering where all the Prorate comments are, which I asked for, I once again really didn't get any. I did get a couple of people who called me sexist in the comments, even though I never once even gave my own opinion in that video, and it was essentially just me saying what women had to say, which is kind of the reason for what I had to say at the start of this video in the first place. Anyway, speaking of letting women have their say, I'm now going to turn it over to my fiance and let her talk about the women of Star Wars for a bit. And just a quick note about this, I don't even know exactly what she's going to say here. I asked her to write this and record it completely independent of me because I wanted her to give a completely unbiased opinion. And the first time I'll be listening to it is after the video is done and uploaded. So without further ado, I turn it over to my fiance, who goes by the name Sailor Naboo here on YouTube, and will be certainly happy to interact with all of you in the comments below after the video.
So let me start by saying that I've loved Star Wars my entire life. I remember watching the originals with my dad when I was a kid, and never really thinking that they were designed with a specific gender in mind. I grew up with 3 sisters, and never once did my parents or anyone else try to tell me that we couldn't like things that we liked based on what gender we were. When I grew up, I honestly had no idea that more guys played video games than girls, as I played all the time with my sisters. So why is it now that I'm an adult that I have to be told how to enjoy things based on my gender? To start, let me give you a rundown of what I think of the different females of Star Wars, starting with the Holy Grail, the original trilogy. I personally loved Luke. I always thought of him as the main hero, and I would like to imagine myself as the hero who could save the galaxy, all my friends, all while discovering myself. Don't get me wrong, Princess Leia really is the best portrayal of a female in the franchise. Why? Because she's perfectly imperfect. What I mean by that is you can see her flaws. You see her arrogance and that she was willing to give everything for her cause, but in the process she doesn't seem to think about herself. As the story goes along, she becomes softer and kinder, learning to trust in her friends and that she isn't perfect and she needs help and she really is a person, not just a character. After Leia, we got Padme. She was great in the first movie. Her personality actually really reminded me of Leia, which is a good thing. But in the next 2 movies, she kind of fell apart for me. The love story really messed up her character and made her weaker, not as self-reliant, and for some reason, her being loved seemed to diminish all of her best characteristics. It made her a lot harder for me to relate to, and I was definitely an Obi-Wan fan for the prequels. The Clone Wars finally gave us new female character in young Ahsoka Tano. She was an instant favorite for me. When I finally got to watch the Clone Wars, which wasn't until it was pretty much over, I noticed something that made me love her. She grows. Ahsoka was a character that evolved over time. At the beginning of the Clone Wars, she's just a snotty know-it-all kid, and she's kind of annoying at times, to be frank. A few seasons go by, and all of a sudden she's a different character. She stayed fun, she stayed true to herself, yet she became wiser, compassionate, and much more worldly. Then at the end of the Clone Wars, she's standing up for herself and her beliefs, and she's even strong enough to leave the Jedi Order. The power that one character has is amazing. In her self-titled book, she has to rediscover herself after the devastation of Order 66. She rebuilds her life and finds that she cannot remain idle. Her beliefs are still all intact. She picks herself up and decides to go stand against the Empire. In Rebels, she's become a true leader, and it just makes me marvel at what she's become when you remember where she started. The character of Ahsoka Tano is a beautiful developmental arc. We see her overcome fears, we even see her fail. Rebels also gave us Hera and Sabine. Now, I found those characters very interesting because of their different backstories, one of them being the daughter of Cham Syndulla, a freedom fighter, and the other being a Mandalorian who was raised in an Imperial Academy and is now outcast by her family and then trying to find her way back to them. I really wish we could have seen even more out of these characters. 4 seasons sometimes does not feel like enough Rebels. I really wanted to see where they were going. I mean, the teaser at the end was just killer. But I digress. Jyn from Rogue One, yep. I don't really like to mention her. She kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't mind her in Rogue One. I actually kind of liked her in it. But then I read the book Rebel Rising, and that book turned her into just a huge problem for her. She just could be great at everything. There wasn't a single thing that Jyn somehow was not trained and well-versed in and amazing at. And that just made her too far-fetched for me. Now, to the end of our movie journey, we have The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. These 2 versions of Rey were very different in my eyes. I liked Rey in The Force Awakens. Yeah, she seemed a little overpowered in terms of using the lightsaber and the Force, but her basic skills could be easily explained. I believe if J.J. Abrams would have gotten to write The Last Jedi, we would have had a real explanation as to why Rey could channel the Force as she did. I think he was setting something up, but we didn't really get to see any of that. I could relate to Rey in The Force Awakens. Her flaw was very different from other characters in the franchise, and it rung a chord with me. It was her need to belong that was her biggest flaw. There was just such a deep loneliness in her. She reminded me of when you're so used to being sad that you just smile so that nobody else can see how you feel, putting on that brave face so no one thinks anything's wrong. But even in the movie, you can see it break through. You see it when she's cleaning salvage at the beginning, and when Finn suggests she go with him, when Han offers her a job in Aunt Maz's castle after the vision, and finally under the interrogation of Kylo Ren. You can see just how lonely she is, how much she needs to belong, how sad she is about losing her family, and how fearing she is that she'll never see them again. Her character was interesting to me, and I like seeing some of my own struggles within her. But Rian Johnson threw that character out in favor of the image for the perfect, flawless woman who comes from nothing and is just amazing. She goes from Kylo Ren is a murderous snake to, oh my god, I can redeem him. He isn't bad, even though he killed all the Jedi Luke was training, half his fellow students. No. It was because Luke doubted him. Is that why he killed his dad, too? This just isn't a feasible explanation for me. So she ends up wandering around like a lost puppy for the entire movie. But the root of my frustration isn't that Rey isn't what we hoped for. It's what Kathleen Kennedy is doing to the fandom. It's the image she's setting of female fans. I honestly worry that when men see female fans, they'll see an enemy. Or we only like Star Wars because it's trendy, or SJW. When I just want to be taken as a serious fan. Star Wars is supposed to unite people in our love for the galaxy far, far away. Old, rich, young, poor, male, female, we all love Star Wars together. But Kennedy seems to be actively trying to ruin that by trying to force girls to love it, because she's going to give you perfect females who are better than all the boys. But that's not what we want. Being a fan isn't defined by gender. Kind of like the Force. It has no gender. It's a force. Star Wars is loved because it takes us to the galaxy we love. It shouldn't be a platform for forcing notions of social justice or political agenda. It should just be a fun place, the place I grew up in, full of great characters and adventures. I shouldn't have to worry that male fans won't take me seriously because of an agenda that is not my own.
Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about what anyone or everyone had to say in this video, or to offer up a new topic for next week's discussion. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.